I mean, one whole.
Okay, very good.
Oh, I live off of Washington County, easy to enough. The fourth pole, so the far southwest corner of the city.
Yeah.
You see woods off, and you're off the north. And then there's a farm.
Oh, nice.
We'll call this meeting to order. Note that the posting of this event was handled appropriately through the clerk's office. Roll call this morning, we have Supervisors Gallantz, McCulloch,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Pollack, and Mr. Schleif is sitting in with us. Mr. Strupp will not be joining us this morning. Stand please for our pledge of allegiance.
My allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first order of business this morning is the election of vice chair. And this is a decision you make as a committee. The vice chair will fill in and run the meetings and sign any appropriate papers in my absence. All of you are eligible to be elected to this position. In that case, just so you're aware, I nominate Supervisor Gallantz to the vice chair position. I do so because of his experience and how this committee operates. In fact, he has run the meeting in my physical absence in the past. Are there any other nominations? Welcome to nominate yourself if you wish.
I don't think they can.
No, you can't, sir. You're sitting here as a guest. All in favor of Mr. Gallantz being named vice president?
Motion in a second.
Oh, yeah, okay, option number second. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Congratulations, Supervisor Gallantz. Now, I have some comments for all of you this morning. First of all, we do not have the sound systems up here operating as they normally would be. And we are being televised, so please speak loudly. Anyone addressing from the podium down here, please speak up also. There was a meeting here last night, and some people speak very softly and down at the podium. We can't hear them up here. Until we get that sound system up and running, just use your, as we say, use your outdoor voice. First of all, thank you for serving your public and congratulations on being elected supervisors. I understand Chairman Schleif contacted both of you, Joe and Ken, and you expressed an interest in serving in the land use group. Welcome. And we welcome back to Larry Strupp. Larry is not here today. Larry serves as a designated representative of the Farm Service Agency and is here because of the responsibilities we have for agricultural issues in the county. We will be joined on this committee by the supervisor elected to serve the role in District 11, which is now open in Hartford. Now, as you looked over the role and scope of this committee, you likely thought were, wow, how am I supposed to know about all these things? They range from oversight at Fair Park, issues regarding conservation and natural resources, 4-H, UW Extension, the Register of Deeds Office, and even some responsibilities regarding UW and Washington County. Let me say up front, you are not expected to know all there is to know about all these various departments and functions. We have a very, very qualified staff who manage these operations on a day-to-day basis. Trust me, if you have a question, they have an answer for you. In that regard, let me reiterate what I said to note to you some weeks back. Please read through the packet of materials that are sent to you, each of you, in advance of this meeting. If you have particular questions that are down in the weeds, so to speak, please contact directly to Deb or Paul or Cindy or whomever's name is at the top of the meeting. Get your answers from them if you can prior to the meeting whenever possible. We very often have members of the public attending our meetings, and we don't want to use up their morning while we discuss minutiae and fine details. However, if you are not satisfied with the answers you get from the staff, it is possible other supervisors have similar questions. And then you should bring those items up at this meeting. We want thorough understanding of what we are deciding upon, but let's not bury ourselves and our public with discussion on items that are removed from the topic at hand. Typically, we will move through the items on the consent agenda very quickly. These are matters of historical relevance, as in this case this morning, with the appointments to the Board of Adjustments. These have already been made by the county executive and are on our agenda for information purposes. The discussion items are just that. Presentations made to this board for discussion with no necessary action required. Feel free to ask any questions of any of the speakers making presentations today. The action items are where we do official business as the county. In that regard, today's action items are very typical of what this committee does. In these cases, this morning, we're being asked to officially declare the county has no objection to these items moving forward. During the meeting this morning, feel free to speak out if you have questions regarding procedures or other protocols. If you're unclear about certain items that are discussed, it is highly likely other supervisors feel the same way. As a side note, for any action items, we will ask for a motion and second on the item first. This allows us to bring the item to the floor for discussion. We will then vote yea or nay on a particular item once all the discussion is complete. One final point, and I brought this up before, use your outdoor voice today, and particularly those people using the podium that are guests. Now, any questions before we move forward? Okay, thank you. Now, we'll move right to the consent agenda. I need a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda as presented. Mr. Vespalic,
I'll second.
Mr. Schleif. Any discussion? Now, these are the minutes from the March 24th meeting, as well as the appointments to the Board of Adjustments. Hearing no questions or other discussions, we'll vote yea or nay on the accepting the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the discussion items. First of all, let's go to the role of the Land Use and Planning Committee. This goes back to the comments I made earlier. Are there any particular questions? I assume that you all have received and thoroughly memorized all these details here. It is quite a laundry list. And some items we may never hear from. We have, as an example, the report refers to oversight for UWM, Washington County. Technically, the county owns that land. But in the 2 years I've been involved in the committee, I don't think there's ever been a topic coming up regarding UWM, Washington County. I don't know, any questions about any items on here? Joe was asking a question this morning about the action items for later today, and really those items are a formality. It's the we're getting into the objections or non-objective or the objecting authority for these four final plats. Typically, those are a courtesy point, and as Chairman Schleif was pointing out, he's previously served as chair of this committee. The one situation came up some years ago regarding the Renwood North subdivision in Germantown, where the county was impacted on this because they wanted two entrances, and at that point in time, that was the county road. Now, since that point in time, the county does not allow two entrances to a subdivision, and so therefore, that was decided they had to make some changes to it. But in regards to that, that particular stretch of highway has now been ceded to the village of Germantown. They have control over it, we don't. But there are always some conservation matters and runoff matters and so on that do get into county areas where the county has the authority over those. That's why we're seeing these items here today. Typically, they're just for a quick review. When we get to that this morning, Ms. Ludovic will give us a brief overview of those particular items. So.
Chair Mayor, so section H regarding the liaison for Fair Park and AIS, is that still accurate?
Yes, we do have oversight for Fair Park. That is a county property. Ms. Ludovic serves on their board, and she has constant communication with them. We've had some discussions, as you're aware. We applied for a grant earlier this year at $5.2 million or some such thing. Can you give us a quick overview on that later? Is that?
I think now it's fine. We did not receive that grant.
Right.
Yes. So the way that this is currently structured is I am on the AIS board of directors. And I think the intent behind that in the new operating agreement was that I both work for the county executive, which represents the executive branch of government's policies, procedures, and thought onto that committee, but as well report through this committee in terms of the items related to land or policy or funding or the operating agreement itself, where you would in theory advise on those topics through me to the AIS Board of Directors. So hopefully some of you, or if you're not able to attend the tour, that will end with the executive director and the facilities kind of going through that structure in a little more detail about, essentially we sell the operation, so there's not a lot of operating questions coming to you. AIS is charged with that. But we do own the facilities, and then in theory, the county is accountable for, the overall, how that's working. And so we'll talk a little bit about that in the current strategic planning process that's happening and how this committee is going to give input and be fundamental in shaping kind of the future out there.
The reason why I had asked that is because with all the Mr. Fody provided the board with appointments and that, I don't recall seeing anything for AIS. In the past you sat on and another board member had, so that's the reason why I asked.
At that point in time, AIS oversight was at the administrative committee. And now that has been moved to this committee. But again, Ms. Ludovic sits on the board.
Yeah, so the new operating agreement changed the structure so that the county board appointments were removed. That was replaced with me. The thought process behind that of having a county executives representative appointed to the board honestly was to more closely, I'm a paid employee, right? So attending those meetings and those committees and some of the strategic planning work and the facilities work liaison that I'm doing right now, we've elevated, in my opinion, kind of our hand in the deck out there by doing that versus relying on, I don't want to say volunteers, but people that then have to navigate both the volunteer structure of the board and the staff side.
Right. And so I'll take it offline. It just seems like we didn't amend that language here, and I don't know if we actually need to. So apparently Attorney Stern or whoever else believes we don't need to. It just seems because we made those structural changes, does that section need to be changed? That's all.
I'll make a note. It is old language.
Supervisor Spaulding, you had a question?
Well, and she had just referenced the tour, and I didn't know if there was something in the works or something coming up where we were going to go see that, or that was.
That's part of the June 4th event.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
That Airfare Park will be part of the June 4th tour.
Okay.
Excuse me, Carol, have we got the time for that yet?
We're going to discuss that.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Get into details of it this morning.
Yeah, and that's important. That'll be important for the orientation because we're going to hit the upcoming major policy issues that I believe in the next 6 months to a year, this board's going to have to weigh in on. And they're all, there's some, it's parks, so it's always, here, but in terms of land questions, I think there'll be some pretty large policy items for consideration.
Other questions on the general land use committee? All right, thank you. Let's move on to UW Extension, Washington County. Good morning.
Good morning. I wrote a lot of copies of our annual report. Can I share with you?
Yes.
Thanks, sir. My name is Paul Roman, I'm a community development educator. I'm here today, starting off instead of Cindy Sarkady, who is our area director. Unfortunately, she's ill this week and she's out of the office and not doing in-person meetings. So I am happy to kick off our annual report presentation to you. And we do have a few of our other educators here as well that'll say a few words just so you can put names to faces as you start off your new term here. So our official name is UW-Madison Division of Extension, Washington County. It is a mouthful. And so Extension Washington County, or UW Extension, which is our former name, is fine as well. So what is our mission? Our mission of Division Extension is to fulfill what's known as the Wisconsin idea, that the boundaries of the university are the boundaries of the state, and that's our mission to extend those resources to where people live and work throughout Wisconsin. and to bring the challenges of the community back to the university to research and study. And we do that through our county partnerships. So the UW-Madison has partnerships with 71 of Wisconsin counties and 3 tribal governments, very similar relationships like we have here in Washington County. And it's a funding partnership. So we're state employees under contract by Washington County to respond to local needs identified by the community as well as by you, our oversight committee and the county board. We operate currently with an area model. So we have an area director, an administrator that oversees 4 county offices. Cindy Sarkady oversees Washington, Ozaukee, Fond du Lac, and Sheboygan. So she gets 4 county committees like yourselves, 4 HR systems, 4 budgets, and all that administrative oversight. And then we have local-based educators, and also we have some shared staff as well between educators between counties. And we have a couple of those that will be presenting in a short minute, just so you kind of understand the structure of what we have. Last year was a unique year, as you can imagine. We started off the year primarily doing virtual educational programs, and over time we transitioned to more in-person as the pandemic and the restrictions were lifted. Our offices are located across the street in the Public Agency Center. We're not over on campus, so that's also something to aware of. They're aligned with UW-Milwaukee. We're aligned with UW-Madison, so they're kind of like our cousins. We relate well to them, but we're not exactly their entity, and we're a little bit different. So we're closely tied and intertwined here with Washington County and responding to the needs here. I'd like to start off by telling you a little bit about my program. As the community development educator, I primarily provide education to local governments and nonprofits. So I do projects for the county board, county committees, county departments, county executive, and then I also do strategic planning, organizational development, and education with nonprofits throughout Washington County. Last year, I had the opportunity to work with 11 nonprofits, doing strategic planning, board development, even had an instance of negotiating a nonprofit merger of the Germantown Chamber of Commerce and Leadership Germantown. And I also had 2 projects for the county executive. One of them was with Matt Furno, where we co-facilitated the Samaritan Task Force. And another project was with Jamie Ludovic, where we co-facilitated agricultural listening sessions for the county executive. I also had the opportunity to work with the health department with their community health improvement plan, which required public participation. So I had the opportunity to help train some of their staff in facilitation techniques and then help actually facilitate those public participation sessions in both Washington and Ozaukee County. Another large scale event was with the West Bend Community Foundation. The On the Table event is an opportunity for citizens in the greater West Bend area to come together to talk about issues impacting the community. So we get elected officials, business leaders, citizens, nonprofit leaders coming together to talk about issues that are important. This past year, we had 80 participants and talking topics like mental health, trauma-informed care, food security, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. The last program I want to mention, I do in conjunction with Carol Brolick, who is our Human Development and Relationships Educator, and that is our staff development program called Real Colors. Real Colors is a personality assessment tool, similar to Myers-Briggs, but easier to remember. We've been using it here in Washington County since 2014. We provide the training to Washington County staff. We also do workshops for nonprofits, for businesses, school districts, whoever's interested. It's a 3-hour workshop. I think all staff in this room has gone through it at least once, sometimes multiple times. And since we've started this workshop series, Real Colors, we've done over 50 workshops since 2014 with over 1,000 participants. So it's been really successful. I think it's helped change some of the culture here in the county and improve the way in which we relate to each other, work together, and also communicate together. So that's my programming. And since I mentioned Carol Brolick, I'll transition into her work. Carol's on vacation this week. We thought originally that this meeting was next week, but it was moved forward. So Carol, as our Human Development and Relationships Educator, in addition to the Real Colors programming with me, she also does a lot of work in financial education and building, increasing financial capacity, and also programs relating to parenting and training with childcare professionals. One program that she highlights in the annual report in front of you, which was new and innovative, was providing a regional training series for helping professionals. And helping professionals are people like social workers, people that work in our human services division here, people that work at EDRC, Aging Disability Recenter, people that work for other social service agencies, and providing education to them on financial literacy and financial topics, so that when they're working with clients, they're more prepared to respond to those questions. So when those helping workers meet with clients, oftentimes financial questions come up, and now staff are better prepared to respond to those questions and help address finances. Next, I'd like to mention our 4-H development program. It's probably our most well-known program in Extension. It's been around for a long time. It's got a logo. A lot of people are familiar with it. It's also both, I think perceptions is that you think it's usually a rural program, that it's farm kids. It's both that and an urban program. There's a lot of urban clubs that are located in cities that are also doing projects on science, technology, engineering, math, and rocketry and shooting sports. So Elliot oversees the 4-H program in the county, which includes over 500 youth, over 250 volunteers that he provides the training to and helps support. We have projects throughout the entire county and clubs throughout the entire county as well. Most recently, there was a Tri-County Visual Arts Festival with Washington, Ozaukee, and Fond du Lac counties, and there's a traveling art exhibit that's occurring. It was just in the West Bend Library. It was there until May 15th, and now it's over at the Cedarburg Library. So if you miss in West Bend, you have an opportunity to see it there. So with that, I will be introducing one of our guests that are in the room today. Pam Bartelli is one of our newer employees in FoodWise, and she'll explain what that means to you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So yes, I'm a new kid on the block. I'm Pam Bartelli. I took on my role mid-February, so I'm still working very hard to learn the curriculum and meet partners and things like that. FoodWise is a federally funded, evidence-based program where we go out and encourage healthy eating, active lifestyles with families of lower income. So far my role, I've been reaching out to past partners and some potential new ones like Big Brothers Big Sisters, WIC, Head Start, and Threshold, NAMI, there's all kinds of them. So we've been meeting, sitting down, going over the different curriculums FoodWise offers, and just kind of setting up some future programming, see where I can fit in with our FoodWise programming. Lastly, I've been getting involved with the community by joining the Head Start Policy Council and the Community Support Coalition. And most recently, I've joined the Harvest of the Month Early Childhood Education program, which is exciting for me because I want to delve more into the Head Start programs. And so with this Harvest of the Month programming, we'll be able to partner with master gardeners, plant some plants with the Head Start families. And then in the fall, I anticipate having some lessons where we incorporate a simple recipe using their produce that they've grown and the nutrient values of those. Okay, so like I said, I'm new, just learning. But next I'm going to pass it on over to Ron.
Welcome.
Welcome, yes.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ron Chickadison, Positive Youth Development Educator. The position is split between Washington County and Fond du Lac County, so I'm running back and forth all the time. As far as focus goes, education to improve youth's life skills and leadership. Really some highlights have been there has been engaging with West Bend School District, doing educational programs in classrooms, as well as helping Fair Park and Jackson do what they call the kindness retreat, which is really getting youth in their 4th grades and 3rd grades prepared for leadership within their school, also learning about their county, learning about some nonprofits. Those were one-day retreats, which historically they always do annually. By engaging Extension, they used to actually contract out with an agency and a program out of state to do this program. So they were able to save some money and engage me in that coordination of that program. Youth adult partnerships and civic engagement. A big highlight really is Youth Futures in Germantown. I've been engaged with their board as well as doing leadership development with their youth officers, as well as helping them, the youth officers, with promotion, how to run a meeting, and team building. Just recently, Youth Futures was chosen for the service organization in Germantown by the chamber. I'm not saying that that was because of me, but I do want to point out that historically, Carol and HDR has done work with parents in Germantown and with Youth Futures. Paul helped a long time ago with their mission and vision. So the value of that nonprofit engaging with Extension has been a great partnership and has helped them successful, not just with some of the small things I've been doing, but just historically. Community outreach and collaboration is really great ways to engage with new partners. Sometimes it's by request. They'll call our office and say, can you come out and do some youth development with our group? For example, the Peers for Peers group is actually in every high school. It's a peer leadership program, but they called up and said, well, how could you come out and help us get ready for our school year? So that's a high school club. I helped out with Kewaskum, but also helped out with their county-wide conference that they had in the fall. So other examples of just, I don't want to say one-timers, but knocking on people's doors include Boys and Girls Club, where I came in and did some staff development on youth leadership and how to engage youth in leadership activities. Working with 4-H within our own office is something that's super important. And so hopefully those little one-timers sort of developed a relationship that we can do some more ongoing training with them in the youth development arena. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tina.
Thank you, Ron, and good morning. I'm Tina Coleman. I'm the regional dairy educator as of January 1st for Sheboygan, Ozaukee, Washington, and Fond du Lac County. And thank you for the opportunity to at least be up here to put a name to a face. I'm looking forward to working with our farmers in Washington County. Our other colleague, Mike Baldwin, who is a regional crops and soils educator, you're familiar with him with the Tri-County Agreement, cannot join us today because he is in the field, which I'll be heading to shortly after this meeting. And then Stephanie Plaster, you're very familiar with, is a farm management educator, is on vacation today. I was asked to give her report, or her annual report from last year. And as you know, Extension was coming out of COVID and remote working at the beginning of 2021. And she had conducted many virtual webinars related to farm management, land leasing, farm succession and transition, and risk management. Many of those webinars are recorded and available for individuals throughout the counties on YouTube. So a great resource that people can see if they were not able to be present for the live webinar. Most of her work was related to farm startups, risk management, pandemic assistance, especially in the early parts of the COVID pandemic. And then more as we are able to go back on farm later in the year, Stephanie was able to do a lot of one-on-one meetings with producers when it comes to farm business feasibility, which she's very good at, marketing, lease development with facilities and land, as well as crop agreements, and then which is a high significance, farm exits and farm transitions is our dairy farmers and crop farmers are aging out, trying to make a decision on how do they transition the debt to the next generation, which is beneficial for both the exiting generation as well as the entering generation. She also managed did volunteer development for your Master Gardener volunteer program last year with 35 Washington County Master Gardener volunteers, providing over 900 hours of volunteer time back to the community. And they reported about 573 hours of continuing education. So as part of that education, Stephanie provides to help develop these volunteers to be better service providers or better community service givers in the community. And also on the youth perspective, doing our youth tractor safety program that allows our youth 12 to 14 years of age to be able to drive tractor for family members here in Wisconsin, and those that are 14 and 15 years of age be able to drive tractor on the roads for those individuals that they are employed by. So those are some of the items that Stephanie done in the past, and I look forward to working with the Washington County producers as we give more in-depth dairy outreach and programming here in the county for the coming years.
That's everything. Do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, Paul, and I want to thank all of you. As you board members will find out, I have a very particular prejudice toward the advancements of the extension office and all it does. And for that reason, you'll typically find a report every month from some aspect of the university extension. I want just to make sure that they're consistently recognized with the role they play in our community here. It's a broad reach group, and probably one of the singular groups that reaches the most residents throughout the county on various topics throughout the year. And so for that reason, and I've got a very deep, very strong affection toward 4-H and extension. I grew up with it since I was that high. Anyway, so you'll consistently see reports from the extension people here. Thank you, Paul. Thank all of you for, I'm sorry, Supervisor Gallup, you have a question?
Real quick question. Are you integrating it at all with the community development program? Because I see tie-in, right? You know, civics is one thing that comes to mind. And
so not directly, but we work very closely. Deb's team works very closely with Paul on the facilitation of planning. And basically, I mean, I can't think of a planning effort off the top of my head that, you know, he helped with the housing and, you know, all of the discussions and public participation events. He's really relied upon as our resident expert. So they're not technically related, but certainly continually working together with Paul to provide that service to our own team.
Deb,
I was just going to say, as we were developing our comprehensive plan, Kevin Struck, who used to be in Paul's position, we worked very closely in working with all of the local governments. And just recently, we worked with Paul on the social capital work group event that we just had a couple of months ago that was very successful. So we definitely partner not on necessarily every project, but UW Extension is an amazing resource that we do use.
That's good. And Jamie?
thank you, Paul. Thank all of you for being here today.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, Ms. Martin, our Register of Deeds.
That would be me. Welcome. Thank you for letting me speak today. I just wanted to go over a few things. As I heard earlier, there's a laundry list that the Register of Deeds office abides by, and that's mainly by a lot of the statutes that we follow. So a little bit about myself. I worked in the Register of Deeds office for 10 years before being encouraged by the former register to run for the position. My first election and taking office was in 2003. So this is my 20th year as Register of Deeds. I have a great team that I work with. When I started as Register of Deeds, things were very archaic, very paper driven. I had 4 full-time, 2 part-time, and then a clerical pool person. So we had quite a few more people in our office. In 2008, we acquired real property listing as one of the divisions for our office. We have Stream that came with 2 full-time employees, and we'll get into real property shortly. They have 2 full-time employees, but with technology, letting the county allow me to take advantage of beta testing a lot of our land records modernization programs. We currently have 2 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. So we've really streamlined, cut down on basic office expenses.
We take in a lot more revenue, and how we take in our revenue is, we have recording fees for all the real estate documents. We are custodian of all the land records in Washington County. The recording fee for each document is $30. For plats and condo plats and subdivision plats, it's $50, but again, those are all by statute. We also, when a home is sold, there's a transfer fee based on the value of that home that we collect. It's based on $3 a thousand. We are kind of a clearinghouse for a lot of the fees that we take in, knowing that part of the recording fee stays with the county. Part of the recording fee, the $30 recording fee, supports the land records programs. The transfer fees, however, we share 80% of that with the state, the county. They allow us to keep 20% of that. So,
Generous,
yeah, very generous. And the fees have been around a long time.
especially with inflated house sales the last 2 years.
Correct. But, you know, even at the 20%, the county takes in a lot of revenue with that. And you can see the annual budgets that go through and the expenses and the revenue that we take in. One of the other pieces to the revenue, and it's kind of alluded to in the reports that I gave, we by statute are allowed to, we have to maintain all those historical records back to the 1830s. So we collect statutory copy fees. With that, they're $2 for the first page, $1 for each additional page. We also enter into contracts with title companies, attorneys, for daily recordings. They basically have access 24/7 with everything that we have online. So it has become pick up your cell phone. I see a property. I want to know who owns it. I want to know what they last bought it for, things like that. So that we use all those fees in conjunction with maintaining all those records that are out there. So some of the things that I alluded to with technology, Washington County back in 2003 was one of the first 2 counties in Wisconsin that started electronically recording real estate documents. Since then, we have gotten to 75 to 80% of our documents recorded are electronic. So we only deal with 15, 20, 25% of paper now. So that really streamlines the workflows in there. We work very hard over the years to digitize all the records. Everything in our office is available online. We do not have indexes for all those images that we have out there, but there's a way of getting to them. I have been working with the county executive's office to hopefully get some federal funding to hire a company. We have about 750 to 800,000 indexes that we'd like to complete and compare the images that are previously uploaded into the system. So everything is available just by typing in a name all the way back to the 1830s then. Trying to think, what else would you like to know about our office? There's a saying, I missed a big part of our office is vital records. So birth, death, marriage records used to be anything that happened in Washington County was filed with the Register of Deeds in a partnership with the State Vital Records. Our association, Wisconsin Register of Deeds Association, worked very closely with our legislators and State Vital Records. And we created since then, a statewide database has been created. So any birth certificates, any marriage certificates can be issued regardless of where you were born or married in Wisconsin. So this really helps out with DMV when people renew their driver's license and apply for the real ID. Recently, and I think the county clerk's office has alluded to this in some of their other reports, they are able to issue marriage licenses. The license used to have to go back to the county where the ceremony took place. With individuals moving around the state, getting married in touristy areas or county, other areas. They can turn that worksheet into any register of deeds and we can put it on record and immediately issue certified copies. So that's been a great partnership. We're just trying to help the citizens and the young ones or the ones that want to get married have the ability to go whatever's convenient with them, whether they work in this area, whether they live in this area, work in Milwaukee, get married in Door County, they can go to any county clerk's office. Then after the ceremony, they can turn that worksheet in to any register of deeds. So just a takeaway, our association has come up with a little saying, if you live or die, sell or buy, you're going to need the register of deeds office. So just remember that someday if you're looking, we always encourage the young high school students when they go to their government days, when they visited the counties in person, we would do the tours that, you know, if you're interested in purchasing a home, it's a huge asset in your life. Do your homework. Look at those records that are on file in the Register of Deeds and educate yourself about what this home is about, what the land is about, what the area is about. So with that, I alluded to real property listing. I brought Brian along. I'll let him explain how our office starts the land records. His is the interim, and then they also work with the county treasurer's office. So.
Sure. Before that, quick question. So just looking at your website with the real ID requirements continue to be pushed out and out, and your office vital in providing people with information on there. Do you guys get a lot of inquiries about that?
As far as applying for the real ID or how?
Because you need you need a valid original birth certificate and that nature. I'm just curious if you saw an uptick of that, and then now it's been pushed out for 2 years now.
Well, actually, the real ID legislation is it's more than 10 years old that it's been available and around. The deadlines actually were supposed to be in 2020.
Until why renew my license until I have to?
Well, if people have their license available and they need to renew it, if they want to apply for the real ID, they certainly can. They need to have a certified birth certificate, or for the process really is you need to present your social security card. You need a birth certificate and then a picture of your driver's license. So fortunately or unfortunately, if you're married, if your last name is different specifically for the female gender, if they married and took on their spouse's last name, now their birth certificate is different than what is on their social security card and their driver's license. So they kind of, I guess you could say, penalized that gender because then they needed that extra piece of paperwork, but they needed to have the go-between between the birth certificate and the current driver's license or the social security card. So with the statewide issuance, the requirement is to apply for the real ID, social security card, birth certificate, driver's license, and then if your name is different, the marriage certificate. So in between all those gaps, if you are married more than once, there also is a requirement for presenting a divorce decree. Our association can also issue, our offices can issue divorce certificates from 2016 forward. We are working with state vital records to get more of that prior to 2016 into that database. So the real ID deadline, true deadline, if they don't move it again, is supposed to be in May of 2023. So yes, we did see an influx of individuals coming in and requiring that additional paperwork. We have seen it now go back down with COVID. People were coming in our office left and right because Department of Motor Vehicles was still open. Once Department of Motor Vehicles closed, then it kind of went way low, but it has upticked again. Most people in the last 4 to 6 years have renewed their driver's license and have the real ID. So we're starting to see a little bit of a downward trend on that now, but I can see it coming back up again when the 2023 deadline comes around again.
Thank you.
Supervisor Schleich.
Sharon is too modest to admit, but she's a leader in the National Association of Register of Deeds, and her leadership has got us up to the highest level of technology, and we really thank you for all you do.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I was poked a few times and voluntold, I think is another word that we kind of use, and asked to participate. I have served as president of the Register of Deeds Association. I currently serve on the Property Records Industry Association Board, which is a national land records board that has monthly meetings as well as 2 yearly conferences. So it's not just so much that in Wisconsin, the way we do things, it's nationally. A lot of the things that they are talking about is record shielding, Daniel's Law, where there's different categories of police and fire judges that don't want their addresses or anything to be in the public record. But there's also a fine line that if you want to buy or sell your house, the title industry has to, search for, are you the current owner? Are there any restrictions, things like that? So there's a lot of different moving parts, and it's nice to hear nationally what other states are doing with their laws and kind of get ahead of it. So laws are passed and then they're basically crap, and then you have to go back and fix them. So we work very closely, and I've been blessed with some great legislators that you can pick up the phone and call them and explain, and they'll do the same thing. They'll call us too. So thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to real property lister, Brian.
Thanks, well, good morning. Good morning. How many of you have been out to the county's website? We call it the red and white screen. We can see all the property information. Just a lot of you? Okay. Almost 80% of that data comes out of my office. There's just two of us. There's myself and Chris. Chris is the specialist. I'm the property lister. A little personal item. I've been here, I'm starting my 28th year. When we started here, assessment rolls would come in. We were manually entering those things, and myself and two other people. A simple township like Richfield would take us almost 4 days to do that in, constantly checking and reviewing. Now we do that with technology in a matter of 10 minutes tops. What we are largely responsible for is spelled out in Chapter 7009. We are responsible for managing the assessment process in Washington County. We work with the treasurers, the town clerks, the village clerks, city officials, the Department of Revenue, and to some degree to the Department of Administration. We think of it as a ballgame. We're sort of keeping the ball in play. The assessment process, I have a diagram off, so if you want to come up and see it, it's not as clean as you might think. Just by statutes, things bouncing back and forth. We're the ones making sure the ball stays in play. Some of the individuals we work with, besides the treasurer and the local governments, we spend a considerable amount of our time working with title companies, helping them get things straight. We work a lot with attorneys. I would say on average, it's about 5% of the documents that get recorded have problems with them. Sometimes they're simple typos. Sometimes they're completely missed property or they don't understand what they're looking at. Our job is to help them do that. We also handle all the splits, combinations, transfers that go on in the county. We work with the GIS folks and show them what they need to do and change their maps. We edit those maps to make sure that they're correct. We supply information for 7009 to anybody that asks. We are not required, we cannot refuse information to anyone. So, we've had people from prisons writing in for information and we have to give it to them. So I don't have a lot of choice in that. Short of that, any questions, comments?
Yes, sir. To Ms. Martin's comment earlier, it's interesting, about the accessibility of information, right? And why, you sell a home or you get a mortgage, well, someone can pull this and now they can nail you crap. So
yes.
It's interesting how we tolerate that in our society anyways.
Well, I do solicit to people. We have a fair number of open records requests that come in. But I've had marketers call up, marketers buy our information. We really don't have a lot of choice in that.
Yeah, I know it's not you, but somewhere along the lines, it's like we can register for no spamming, you know, on our devices here, but we can't get our name removed from a list of, because we purchased a home or we got some other note.
Well, and it's interesting you mentioned that the entire assessment process for property relies on openness. The whole system works because you know what your neighbor is being assessed at, what your neighbor paid. You can look at the data. The assessors have that the more detailed information, but we have more of the larger aggregate of that. So yeah, that's just the nature of the way the assessment process has to work.
Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. As Chairman Schleif pointed out, and I tried to make a comment earlier, we've got extremely well-qualified staff throughout the various agencies in the county. Sharon has been cited. I know a number of the extension people have gotten acclamations and awards, both regional and state and Midwest. We've got just one of the greatest teams I think you're ever going to find working here with us in Washington County. Anything else?
No, other than I encourage you, if you've never visited our office or Brian's office, please stop by. It's one of those not very exciting, thrilling offices, but it's a necessary cog in the wheel for Washington County. So we'd be happy to explain a little bit further and show you around.
I would encourage you to do that if you've not. Give an hour sometime, go through there. She said it's not the most exciting stuff, but it's very interesting. As she said, they've digitized information going way back, well over 150 years. And thank you this morning.
Thank you.
Moving on with the report from the Natural Resource Department.
I'll take that and just thank you, Sharon. We are blessed to have great elected officials, and I just wanted to point out Sharon being elected to that role, she is really great, and we're lucky that she continues to run and take that leadership. So,
yes.
So I'm going to start with the organizational chart that's in the packet under the Natural Resources Department, and that's sort of why I was overly pointing out that Sharon is elected. My name is Jamie Ludovic. I'm the Chief Community Development Officer. So I am one of 4 appointed positions by the county executive. So the departments that work for the county executive, the first is that I'm going to talk a little bit about in theory is natural resources. So I am also quasi serving as a department head here. The Natural Resources Department is composed of 3 divisions. These people and individuals are really kind of the technical experts in these areas. They are going to be here over the course of the next few meetings talking about what their initiatives are that we're currently working on. And I'm happy there's a good amount of information in the packet about kind of the nuts and bolts of what we do day to day. But you'll get a good orientation of this through for parks, the tour, and then with golf course through the initiatives that we're working on over the next few months. So the golf course, parks, and then we have kind of conservation and land use, which composes the regulatory function. And again, several of the initiatives we're going to go through in depth, sort of what's hot in those areas over the next 3 months. So that's really the Natural Resources Department. I'm happy to sit down with anybody and go through the revenue structure or the revenue mixes and budgets. So the golf course and the parks area both operate without taxpayer funding. So we have diversified revenue streams that make up our entirety. And so we are very focused on building out, and we're getting to the point now. And I point this out to some of you who are on the committee where the initiatives we're working on that we're going to be talking about are really moving, if you think of a pendulum where, we were kind of cut, and we kind of got here, we're in this diversified revenue stream and we're starting to kind of look at, okay, now we're able to do some of the things that maybe typically you may not see on the top of the radar in a conservative county. So to give you an example, you'll be seeing soon a prairie burn out at Yar to manage some of the natural prairies out on that property. So that's some natural management that's happening, being funded obviously by the mix of revenues, the user fees and the beach revenues coming in from park users. So that is starting to happen and we're really excited about that. Then on this org chart, you see we have a shared office that really keeps the lights on. The community development department, and Deb's going to go through her department in a minute, is in our office. And then the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension is a little unique. Cindy Sarkady she is a state employee. So she's just liaisoned by me through the county executive's office on some of the issues or topics or initiative questions that are going to come before you. And then what you don't see on this chart is really the Fair Park and AIS and EWC, our area also liaisons with those groups on behalf of community development, economic development. So we're I think one of the most outward facing areas for the day-to-day residents that come in that aren't seeking specialized services. And so that's really exciting. So I'll look forward to going in depth in any of these areas, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have now about the Natural Resources Department. Okay, great.
While Deb is coming up, let me just make a comment about the Natural Resources Department. That's Paul Siegel's group. And that is typically where we'll get into agricultural oriented questions, items of interest or discussion points that will come up. So with that, we'll turn over to Deb. Thank you.
All right, good morning. I'm Deb Silski, the Community Development Director. Community Development is actually a new department. It was created back in October of this last year. I did have quite a bit of handouts and background information provided to you in the agenda packet. There's actually 5 main areas for community development. There's next generation housing, social capital, brownfields redevelopment, and long range planning. I'm just going to take a minute to go through each one of those. But before I do, I wanted to point out that the 5th area, the workforce and education area, that's part of the Our Great Community campaign and part of this department. But with the department being very new and focusing in on next generation housing and social capital, along with brownfields and long-term planning, we're really trying to get that next generation housing and social capital up and going. And so I anticipate at the end of this year or the beginning of next year is when we'll start focusing in on the workforce education component of the department. But that's really not part of what we're doing today. So. The first area is the Next Generation Housing Initiative. Last night at the County Executive Committee, I went over the framework for the Next Generation Housing Fund. So if you're interested in some more detail on this, by all means, please take a look at that and give me a call for any details. But generally, the goal of the Next Generation Housing is to provide 1,000 new owner-occupied housing units over the next 10 years. In next generation developments with 75% under 300,000, 25% under 400,000, including home and lot. The county executive did set aside $10 million for this initiative. It's really covering 2 main areas. One is a home forgivable loan program with $2.5 million, and then the rest is for the next generation development itself, and that's broken down into separate pools of money as well. But the framework spells out all this information very clearly. So I do recommend you taking some time and taking a look at that framework if interested. The one thing I wanted to point out, though, that when we do have proposals that come forward for part of that $10 million fund, those proposals are actually going to the County Executive Committee. But I will be providing updates to the Land Use and Planning Committee through our EOS updates that we'll be doing, I believe, every 3 months. The next area that I wanted to highlight is the social capital. That's the second main area. And social capital, there might be a new term for you. It's building networks of relationships among people who live and work in a community
and building those close-knit connections and allowing that community to grow and thrive. One of the primary roles of social capital within community development is going to be as part of the forgivable loan program for next generation housing and connecting borrowers of that loan program to nonprofits and tracking the forgiveness component of that loan. The next area is our Brownfield site redevelopment program. This is actually a nationally recognized program. If you are not familiar with this program, I did provide links to the county website as well as the story map, and we have had many great successful redevelopments throughout Washington County, including the new hotel, Rincon in the city of Hartford, Saxony Village and Germantown, just to name a few. So take a moment to take a look at some of those story maps, provides background and the capital stat funding and how that has got established, as well as the impact to Washington County. On the next page, I just wanted to point out that we do track the success of our Brownfields program with about $2 million of investment through the US EPA Brownfields funding. We've had quite an impact with 32 acres redeveloped, 294 new housing units constructed, including the 68 hotel rooms, with an additional almost 70 million of investment in construction just through the Brownfields program. So it's been very successful. We currently have 3 main funding sources for the Brownfields program, 2 revolving loan funds. One is funded through the US EPA, and one is funded through the county. Those program requests will go through the EDWC revolving loan fund committee. And then we have our county Brownfield assessment fund, that's $600,000. We have a site redevelopment committee that is made up of our local governments as well as some other entities. They review the initial approval of those proposals, and then those also go to the county executive committee for final approval. But again, I'll be providing this committee with an update through that EOS process. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about long-range planning in the county. That's our 4th main area. And this is something that, as part of Planning and Parks Department, we've been working on since the early 2000s. And this is the update of our park and open space plan and the development of our bikeway and trail network plan. On the last page of the handout, we've also done the update to our comprehensive plan. As far as the land use and planning committee, this is probably the area where I will be seeing you the most in consideration of updates to any of these plans. Through resolutions, any grant applications will come before land use and planning, as well as any comprehensive plan amendments related to subdivision plat reviews. Lastly, I just wanted to point out that the Farmland Preservation Plan is actually a plan that we're going to get started updating yet this summer, and probably have an advisory committee starting next year to review some of that update. So if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Sure. Very, very timely. The administration announced that an affordable housing stock program over the next 3 years, 100,000 some homes or rental units that they want to be able to get on the market. I'm assuming your department's aware of that. Just curious how we could capitalize on it. Are there any funds here yet, or we just don't know?
What is the program? I'm sorry.
President Biden announced the affordable housing program.
I actually would have to look into that. I'm curious if that is through the HUD funding, which would be different. Yeah.
I'm looking at the press briefing, but it doesn't speak to specifics.
I will certainly look into that.
And just to jump in, that's talking about a $350,000 price point, $400,000 price point. I don't know the details of that program, but I doubt it's gonna qualify as affordable housing.
The other lower, and I have my own opinions about how $350,000 is affordable for workers making $20, $30 an hour, but that's another discussion.
Yeah, I'm not saying it is, I'm just, the funding usually is tied to.
Yeah.
income.
Yeah.
And we're just too, I mean, that's part of our overall problem in this county. We have too much money. So.
Yeah, we're trying to solve the worker problem unless you can pay them $50 an hour. Can't afford a house.
Any other questions this morning? Gentlemen? Deb, thank you very much. And we realize in the future, you're going to have a quick conflict, so we'll put you as early on the agenda as we can. So you can get out of here to go to your walk or show meetings in the future.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you. Now we're going to move on to the action items. Today, we're going to be asked to indicate no objection to the final plats for 4 subdivisions that are being developed in the county. The items, as items such as these come up in future meetings, I encourage you to take a ride, stop by, or just try to get a feel for what the actual subdivisions look like now. I took a ride out to Renwood Estates or Renwood North, whatever it is called, Freistadt, Germantown yesterday. Unless you had a 4-wheel drive, I wouldn't get into the property, but the topsoil has been removed, the rough roads are in place, and it's going full bore. So the first item on the agenda today is item 7A, the final plat for Monches Highlands in the village of Richfield. Is there a motion and second for no objection? Mr. Westfalik, Mr. Gallis.
Second.
Discussion item. Jamie, can you give us any updates on this?
I just want to take a moment to talk about these items A through D as a group quickly. So chapter 257, plats are highly regulated through the state in terms of what we do and don't do. Our land division code, it's one of the initiatives we're working on, chapter 257, an update to it. When we have the preliminary, right now, the way our code is written, both the preliminary plats and the final plats need approval by this committee. That has been in place for a very long time. But that is a rule that the county has imposed on itself. When we're talking about objecting authorities for plats, we really don't have a lot to say about this. We advise in the preliminary plat phase on things where we do have jurisdiction. So we go through our checklist of, county road access, shoreline zoning, septic. Does it align with comprehensive plans? Like we deploy our professional staff to say, are there any red flags to make the state or the local community aware of from our jurisdiction? And if so, we provide those comments. If not, we recommend issuing no objection because in this case, the village of Richfield is the approving authority around what happens in these subdivisions. So you will see us starting to have a conversation about you in the future of whether or not these things should come to the committee for an action or as just more of a notice that the final plat for Monches Highlands, here's what it looks like. Because what it does is we have an applicant in the audience right now that we can only issue these approvals from the county, these letters they wait for as quickly as we can convene your committee. And so sometimes that's problematic because it requires one of 3 things to happen, and this happened this month. One, the clerk's office receives items very, very late. They're sometimes not in your packet or, they're not the way that we would like to do it. B, we call a special meeting of this committee because we don't want to have applicants wait 30 days for the next meeting. Which we do from time to time right now, because we have a permitting function and we really try to not be a stopgap government. Or 3, we put them on the next agenda, which is why you have 4 of them here because, depending on how timely they are and whether we're the last ball in the air or the first ball in the air, right? There's all these pieces. Sometimes it doesn't matter if we wait. But I just point that out to you because we're objecting. We already saw the preliminary plats. There's really not a lot to say here. They're becoming fairly technical, and unless you have a sound reason, you can't just be like, "Oh, we don't like this." That's not a thing. And can't think of any times with new development where the county staff has had concern about, say, the access on the highway. They don't have their highway access permit. So we don't know how they're gonna get onto the road, that you've said, yeah, ignore that. Right? Don't make them do soil or, don't talk to the fire department. So it's becoming rather, I think, routine. And so that'll be a question for this committee in the 257 update of how you want to see these items come forward. And the difference between when we're objecting, meaning a city is involved, right? The city of Hartford. We see every plat that goes through the city of Hartford versus town lands where we are the approving entity and we govern. So there is a difference between whether we govern or whether we're just like, hey, notified. So these are, in this case, this is the village of Richfield, followed by village of Germantown, followed by the village of Richfield, followed by the village of Slink. So local control, kind of governs these. So that's my prelude to, the timeliness of these and that question that'll be coming forward in the 257 update about how you want to handle these plats.
Question for you, or perhaps Mike, would there be a problem with just voting for all of these in group, or do they need to be handled individually?
These, those are the types of things, right? We could just make a change and list these on consent for your, basically knowledge. Like we've already issued the letter to the DOA, so we're not hanging it up and then we put them on the agenda. So there's a few ways you can streamline the process, but yeah, the only thing requiring us to have this committee approve these right now is ourselves. So I'm
Mr.
pointing that out.
For my 2 cents, as you know, I served as chair of this committee 2 terms ago, and I can't recall us ever objecting. Like you said, staff always goes through all the checklists before it ever comes to us. And the recommendation has always been to not oppose, so.
I mean, I really think the value, if I'm you, is that specifically, I'm gonna pick on Supervisor McHewlett, you're Hartford, are you a Hartford?
Correct.
To know and just kind of have that, if you're not involved in the city of Hartford politics, but you are the county or in Germantown, Supervisor Mary, that you kind of, hey, I know what's going in. Hey, it's just more of a making sure our supervisors don't get blindsided by developments in their areas, by residents who may or may not understand who actually has authority or just see you as a community leader, and might want to express to you that they have a problem with the Montes Road, buildings for whatever reason. And there is multiple avenues for you to weigh in and opine on your, I hate that subdivision but legally what we want to say as an organization is relatively restricted, right? We can't weigh in on, well, that developer leaves stuff and, we don't like that type of a development. And staff tries not to do that even in cases where they might say like, yeah, we don't love this development, right? We want it to be X, Y, Z. It'd be nicer if it was smaller lots. Like that's not our role in the development process.
Could I answer Chairman Mary's question that yes, they can take all 4 of these items as a single motion?
Yes.
And vote. So that is acceptable. You don't have to have a motion and a second for all 4 of them. We can note in the minutes that the motion and second was for all 4 of these.
All right, that's
because we bring these items not once, but twice to this committee.
Preliminary.
Right.
Okay, so there's a preliminary.
so.
Actually,
Yes,
if I may, the second item, we actually did object back in 2018.
Because of the 2 entrances to the highway.
Yeah, but there was also a question about the wetlands,
Yeah.
for example, and the administration document talks about how actually 1 and 2 were resolved, but didn't necessarily speak about number 3. That would be the one question I would have. But so I think what you're saying is, as we go through the preliminary, staff, they're doing their due diligence, ensuring that all county required purview and review is being done. So it comes before us as, dare I say, a rubber stamp.
Well, if you're gonna, I mean, this is the conversation, right? If you're gonna see it and want an approval, in my mind, the preliminary plat's the spot to do it.
Right.
When you're noticed, and then the final plat, we could have issued BJ's letter, last week, that we're good to go, you met our objections, and, told you about it. And he wouldn't be sitting here through the orientation for an hour and 15 minutes, bored out of his mind, because he's got to get a routine rubber stamp from this committee.
Right.
And can't afford to have it go down.
Right, similar to 7C, which, if I'm not mistaken, already went through a final. So why another final, if I read that right? Was it just because it was, a delay?
Yeah, there's time. Time is,
But you're right, it's those things that I think from a policy standpoint, for the benefit of the developers, whatever, and an effective, efficient use of time and their experience with the county, we should.
so we can have that discussion when we talk about the code change that would be required, because we have our own law about you as the approving authority, but certainly think about the notice piece of it, because I do think that there's some value in, as Supervisor Mary indicated, driving past the subdivisions going in your area and knowing and understanding and owning that as an elected official, even though technically you might say, here's the guy at the city of Hartford I can put you in touch with, right? Like, that's not me. So, anyway.
Jamie?
Yep.
I have one last, I have one question. This is just a newbie question and a first time one. So obviously with regard to these 4 villages, they've done, along with the development, there's the research of the impact on the school districts, on the fire, on the police. That's all baked in. There's an understanding and they know.
Yeah, most municipalities, so they're the entity that's driving this process. And most municipalities have park impact fees, fire impact fees, water and sewer impact fees, sanitary impact fees. They go through the fire department, the police department, the
school districts
get notified as part of the plat process, and school impacts and land swaps. And so the plat process, there's a whole big chart through the state. It's very, I mean, BJ probably can speak to this better than anyone right now, what you have to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. We started ours about 8 months ago, somewhere around there. And with the Village of Slinger, we've gone through at least 4 separate meetings, along with probably monthly meetings with engineers, monthly meetings with every portion of it, whether it be zoning, is that engineering, the administration, so on and so forth. So there are a lot of boxes that need to be checked from the beginning to today.
And I'll this is my plug for our villages and cities. They're good. Like, they're relatively sophisticated. The village of Germantown is not gonna miss a big issue, right? Their residents are not gonna allow for it. And that's really the city of Hartford is not gonna, they don't take these lightly. So we have it's not it's not 30 years ago where we feel like our staff is more technical and is going to catch things that they're not going to be thinking about.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Sure. There were questions brought up by Supervisor Gallitz on the preliminary plat for Renwood.
Yeah.
As pertains to the primary environmental corridor and Wisconsin DNR, looking for approvals on wetlands. All this area was added to the sewer and water service area in Germantown, and that requires a review by SEWRPAC. This went through several years ago, but they all point that out too. So I'm certain that Germantown has satisfied all those things.
Yeah, so I had the same question when I was prepping for this meeting, Supervisor Gallitz, because the way the report reads is not clear. Essentially what they did in this case is they had their preliminary plat. We had those 3 concerns. Then if you can kind of see this Post-it note, they split it into two. They brought the final plat forward for the back part first. And so they like broke it up into like two phases. And so this is the second phase. That's why it says the final plat was brought back on November 25th. For the portion that they did first, because they removed the northern part with the connection to the road. And they just did this like back part first because they must have thought it was easier, and now they're bringing this part forward. And they've addressed all of the objections we originally had in the plat.
Sure, I would offer a motion to approve items 7A through D, no objecting, based upon conversation on each of those.
There's already a motion on the floor.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
We didn't have it for all four, did we?
We did not have it for all four, so I would say vote on
The first
the
one.
first one and then do the motion.
Then combine
The
it.
second.
All right. So the motion is to vote for no objection to the final plat for the Montrose Highland subdivision, yea or nay? We have a motion and a second for that.
I'll second.
You already have the
We
motion.
have
Sorry, you already have the
second.
motion.
We have motions for it.
You already have the motion in a second for that.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right,
Then I'll make the motion for 7B, C, and D, no objection, based upon discussion.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. Thank you. Our next meeting date will be Thursday, June 16th at 7:30 a.m. Now, question regarding the tour. After a couple of fits and starts, we finally determined we'll have our parks tour on Saturday morning, June 4th. The question is what time and where do we meet?
So I'm proposing that we meet at Homestead Hollow County Park. From there, we will travel to Glacier Hills and then Heritage Trails. Those three parks are really, I think, where there's some policy questions coming that are relatively interesting. And then we'll end our tour at Fair Park. I'm hoping to be at Fair Park between, like, saving a half hour for the executive director to kind of tour those facilities. So it's really a matter of what time you guys want to start.
Are we going to be traveling in individuals or are you going to meet everybody and take a county vehicle to drive us around or what?
Well, I'm planning to have at least one, like we'll have our Ford Explorer out there. So I was thinking that we could drive together, some of us, and if people want to drive separately. I don't know if I guess we probably all would fit in one car. So
Are
we
you
can
gonna be
do
joining
that.
us, Jeff? I plan on it. So there would be 6 of us. I have my vehicle. I can take 4 passengers easily enough.
There's 6 of us?
Well, the 5 of us and you.
Well, Supervisor Gallett's in the conflict, I think.
Oh, I'm
So what
sorry.
time are we doing?
Well, that's part of the point of discussion. So I personally, not that I choose, I will serve at your discretion. The earlier we meet, the better, right? So if we meet at 7, we could potentially be done at Fair Park at 9 and then done by 9:30. And I'm very much keeping us on track for that. I mean, it's Saturday, June 4th. It's a, I don't know how much time we want to give to some of these things, but certainly that gets at, if people want to ride separately or they want to join later, that's, something we could do depending on how that works.
So 7 a.m.
I mean, I'm up for anything, so that whatever time you guys want to meet.
I'll bring the coffee.
For everyone, bring your own.
All right.
Are you gonna email us out an agenda and all that, where we're gonna meet and all
Yeah,
that?
the clerk will actually put out an agenda for this because we will be talking about policy issues that.
And then just the time where we're gonna meet, all of that
Yep.
stuff, so we just.
Yep,
All right, 7 a.m. on June 4th at Homestead Hollow Park.
So starting at Homestead.
Yep, details will follow.
Yep.
Any other questions?
There is one more thing,
Yes, ma'am.
on meetings, and we're gonna look at this on June 4th a little bit, but I will be sending this committee an FYI on a public information meeting that's happening related to, the A&R pipeline, natural gas line running through the village of Germantown, which is slotted to go through our park, which is going to be, you know, depending where they place that, clear cutting 100 feet of mature trees. Like, this is regardless of, we're gonna be having a discussion about the cost of that easement and what they, you know, that's one of the policies that I really want to make sure this committee takes a look at that land and what that impact means for our park on that tour. And we're currently, seeking counsel that has experience negotiating with gas lines on this. And so, the county executives team is doing our part to facilitate this, but eventually this is gonna land, you know, in 3, 4, 5 months with this committee. And so understanding what that property looks like is important. So there's a public information meeting. I asked, are you showing a line through the middle of our park at this meeting? And they gave me it's high level. There's a map, but you know, we haven't, you know, made any, and I'm like, okay, well, if my elected officials are gonna get calls about this park, because someone narrows in on where this pipeline is going, like, we need to talk. And then he's like, well, maybe if somebody's smart. But so I will send you the notice for that meeting if anyone has interest or this is in your jurisdiction. It's not just the park, it's a whole full project.
Which road does it run through again?
Yeah.
I mean,
Isn't there an existing gas line just east of Homestead Hollow?
yeah, that's the one they need to gut and make big to service the industry that's happening. And what happened is their existing easement, they allow people to develop right adjacent to their easements, but they have like, we have the details if anyone's interested, but they have like 100-foot easement or 50-foot easement. They need like double that now because of the size of pipes they're putting in, which there's too many houses right on the border that cost effectively, they have to move the line in certain places. And so they're looking at, it's not just the park, there's farmland, and other land, and we believe they can likely take the land. I don't know how that works with the gas line utilities, but there are other properties with significant impact through the village of Germantown adjacent to the, I can show you guys the.
But gas is going away.
Huh?
Gas is going away.
Yeah, we are gonna have it.
Why do we need infrastructure for something that's going away?
I completely understand. It's just more of a, people, this is gonna be one that is gonna be
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Contentious, very contentious.
how much are they paying? What is this? You know, so they're starting those conversations, and I pointed this out, I encourage you not to speak on the county's behalf. We've lawyered up. Like, we're gonna be talking about.
So we could plan on that morning to get, so that'll be part of our discussion on that Saturday morning.
A little bit. I mean, we don't have any recommendations yet, but it'll be helpful to see that area. So I will send you the notice for that public information meeting if anyone has interest. It's a Thursday night. I'm gonna try to go, or Tuesday night.
Let the record show that Mr. Gallup's indicated he's bringing coffee.
Yep, Saturday morning.
With that, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Coffee?
Yep.
Perfect.
You know what? The other.